Smart webinar series. We have been on a journey over the last 5 weeks, and we have held 10 sessions. Well, this is our 10th session. So I want to welcome you all, those of you who have been with us since the beginning. Thank you for supporting our webinar, and those of you who have just participated in some, and we want to thank you also. I want to thank you for all the feedback you have given us, and that has informed us as we rolled out the various sessions so that we have been improving, we hope, over the period. This session today, which is a livestock focus, actually is a result of feedback from our first session where we were speaking a lot about crops, and we had the noise from the floor saying, what about livestock? And so it is my pleasure this morning to welcome to present to you on the livestock conservations where smart agriculture is concerned, Mr. Albert Ferron, who is my colleague and friend for many years. So I'm going to do a brief introduction of Albert, present to you for 20 minutes. After that, we will take a 15-minute question and then we will lead into 2 presentations, 10 minutes each, by Steve Maxime and Christian Fleming, who have been throughout this webinar series, popping in and out. And so they should be familiar to some of you, but I'll introduce them nonetheless. And then we will go into our closing of the webinar series. So please join me in welcoming our panelists today. And also, I would like to recognize the partners from the Mona Office for Research and Innovation at the University of the West Indies. They are the project management unit of the pilot program for climate resilience, which is the program under which this webinar series is being hosted by CARDI, which is implementing the agriculture component of the the PPCR project, we call it for short. So without further ado, I am Dion Clark-Harris, CARDI representative acting in Jamaica, and I'm going to be your moderator this morning. So I hope you enjoy this final session, and I will now introduce to you officially Mr. Albert Ferron. So Albert Ferron is a senior livestock scientist at the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute. He currently heads the livestock section in Jamaica, and he has been schooled in the university career in the United States of America, where he pursued a Bachelor of Science in Animal and Poultry Science at the Tuskegee University. And then he pursued a Master of Science in Animal Science from the Alabama Agriculture and Mechanical University, A&M University for short, at Huntsville, Alabama. So as I said, Mr. Ferron has had a long career, and it spans over 30 years. But before joining CARDI, he had held academic and administrative positions at the Alabama A&M University. Mr. Ferron, in his career, has contributed significantly and impacted the development of the small ruminant industry in the region. He has implemented several projects where small ruminants have been concerned, some of them being the EU-funded and FAO-managed food facility project. He also served as regional coordinator for the Common Fund for Commodities small ruminant project titled Diversification of the Caribbean Livestock Sector through the Production of Small Ruminants. And this project was executed in Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago. He has also participated leading in other projects, the New Zealand-funded Small Ruminant Capacity Building Project and the Agriculture Policy Program, APP, which was executed in the ACP countries with emphasis on crops and livestock. So you can see why we called on Mr. Farron this morning to do this presentation. So Albert, over to you now, please.
Okay, can we share the screen? Okay. Good morning everyone. Good morning.
Good morning, Albert.
Good morning.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Albert.
it's indeed a privilege for me to try to do this presentation this morning as it relates to livestock and climate change. And I must say that in my sporting career, I'm normally used to opening the batting, but realize now that I'm close to the inning, and this is actually a new experience for me. But I'll try my best to see how I could avoid defeat and victory instead. So this morning, we want to speak to you about climate change and its impact on livestock. And on my very first slide, I try to, represent to you pictorially on some of the incidents that is happening across the livestock sector, from chickens to small ruminants and to the big one, and its impact on the climate change, and also the impact of climate change on these animals. So I'll try to go through quickly this morning with you on some of the, okay, let me get up the slideshow. Okay, good. So I'll try to go through quickly on this topic. So I'll be looking at the introduction, impact of climate change and livestock, impact of livestock and climate
Albert,
change.
are you sharing
Yeah.
your screen? Because we're not seeing it.
You're not seeing my screen?
No.
Okay. Oh boy.
Just click and share. It will show whatever you wanted to show.
You can share. Okay. Just a minute. Yeah. Are we, is that any better now?
Albert, we're seeing it now.
You've seen it now?
You could put it, Albert, you could put it in slide
Yes,
mode.
yes, I
Okay.
will.
Excellent.
We're okay now?
Excellent.
Okay, great. So I was saying that my first slide, I'm showing you some of the activities that involves livestock, whether they're trying to stand in a pool to cool down, or they're panting, or they're trying to wallow in the mud, as in the pigs, as a result of their comfort zone to adapt from this climate change. So I'll go through what the presentation is: impact of climate change on livestock, impact of livestock on climate change, and we look at some of the adaptation and mitigation measures, and then a short conclusion. Okay, although everybody has gone through this already, we still need to focus on what this whole climate change thing is. And it's a change in the global regional climate patterns, in particular, a change apparent from the mid to late 20th century and onward, and attributed to largely the increased levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide produced by the use of fossil fuel. And also, in terms of global climate change, it's a primary caused by greenhouse gases, mainly the CO2s, the methane, and the nitric oxide. And it can be, of course, naturally, or it can be human induced. but most of it is human induced. So livestock products are very important agricultural commodity for global food security because they provide about 70% of the global kilocalorie consumption and 33% of our global protein consumption. So we can see how important the whole livestock sector is. And it also contributes to livelihoods of over 1 billion of the poorest of us in the global population. And it also employs over 1 billion people in this industry. Based on people's lifestyle, there's a growing demand for livestock products, and its rapid growth in developing countries has been deemed as the livestock revolution. So we have the green revolution, and now we are looking at the livestock revolution. And it contributes about 15% of the global emission. So that's why it is very, very important. But now let me have a brief look at the, the whole animal's contribution to the whole global climate change and the amount of gas in the atmosphere. And we have at the top the three big culprits: cattle, and we break it down into beef cattle and deer cattle, and also buffaloes. Know that some are looking rearing. And if we look at enteric methane, we realize that the cattle and sheep and goats, the ruminants, are the major contributors. But the three big ones are cattle and to a lesser extent buffalo. They contribute about 80%, or around about 80% of the gases that would contribute to the greenhouse gases. Pigs, it's to a lesser extent, have a little bit of contribution to that. But chickens are really not a major contributor as far as methane is concerned. We have a problem with chickens because of the way the feed and the way they're reared. They're about 60% of 66% of nitrous oxide. So we just use this to show you, what it is here. In terms of enteric fermentation, and enteric fermentation is it takes place in the digestive system of the animal. So the rumen of the ruminant animals are the major effects, and that have to do with the whole microbial fermentation and in food and soluble products. And again, we look and we see that in terms of cattle, they're responsible by themselves for of the whole enteric fermentation. We have other contributors, like the way we use our land space, fertilizer and chemical manure as it is excreted from different type of animal, agricultural operation, and feed processing, which again goes back to our livestock and the transportation of livestock products. And because they excrete manure, we have to look at the whole storage of manure and processing of these stuff. Okay, so what we're going to look at first is the impact of livestock on a whole, and we'll be focusing mainly here on the ruminants. So temperature affects most of the critical factors for livestock production, and we're going to look at the whole aspect of water availability, animal production, reproduction and health, and forage quality and quantity, and of course, livestock diseases. Okay, so if I look at this this picture here, I'm dividing it into three different sections, and we look at increase in CO2 and the precipitation variation, as well as the whole effect of the livestock on the change. So if you look at what causes an increase in CO2, we have forage, changes in herbage. That means the growth of the the forages that we use for the livestock. We can see decrease in forage quality because of the amount of CO2. There are also positive effect in terms of the partial stomata opening and the reduced transpiration and the improved water efficiency because of the whole increase in the carbon dioxide. In terms of water, because of the heat stress that the animals might go through, there'll be like a increase in water consumption up to 2 to 3 times the actual amount that that would have been used. And there's also decrease in nutrient availability, increase in herbage growth, and especially in places like the United States where you have C4 production of corn and sorghum and stuff like that, where they need a temperature of 30 to 35 degrees centigrade. And decrease in feed intake is one of the issues that will happen. And in terms of production, high producing dairy animal, normally we'll see some decrease in terms of the milk production. Meat production will also decrease because of the reduction in body size related to these animals. And of course, you'll have problems with reproduction, and you'll have issues as far as health and disease is concerned. Because of the long dry season, be decreased in, and there's also forage growth, forage growth, the whole biodiversity issues. And of course, because of that too, you might have issues with waterway and flooding, and because of the different changes in climate. So of course, we'll just quickly look through. Oops, I'm sorry, we're going backwards. Okay, so increasing carbon dioxide consumption will result in herbage growth, and of course, one of the things you'll see in some cases you'll have improving some plant growth because of the water efficiency. So that's one of the positive effects. Change in temperature and carbohydrate levels will affect the composition of pasture. You see different type of species growing in your pasture, which is actually good. And the quality of the feed crops and forage may be affected. It might be in areas you might have increase in fodder, increase in fodder in terms of variety. At the same time, you might have decreased. The extreme climate events such as floods may affect actually the rooting system of the animal, because if there's too much water, then the plants cannot grow properly. So you have decrease in forage quality. Water availability will influence the livestock sector, which uses, well, a lot of water. Of course, right now, they use about 8% of the global human water use. And this will go about 2 to 3 times if the global climate change continue on the way it is at present. And of course, we know about the sea level rises. More salt water will be introduced into the aquifers. And of course, then you'll have salination, which will influence the livestock production in terms of their whole metabolism. It will be more difficult for them to digest their food, and their fertility rate will go down. It will also impair their cardiovascular function and how they excrete, and the skeletal system and nervous system. The animals may not be able to withstand broken bones and stuff like that, and the respiratory system will be compromised. And of course, there are some diseases that will occur. Some of them are based on direct impact of climate change, and the direct impact is because of the increase in temperature, and so therefore there increase in potential death and morbidity of animals. And of course, the indirect aspects will be on the amount of pathogens that will be in the atmosphere, and this will accelerate growth of pathogens, of course, and they'll live their life cycle outside of their host. So there'll be an increase in pathogen. Vector-borne disease will be spread because there will be the incident of more ticks, vector-borne disease like mosquitoes and so forth. And of course, we'll be looking at more foodborne disease. Some of them will be host resistant, and there will be feed and water scarcity as a result of that. All right. So the big one is heat stress is one of the big problems. All animals have a thermal comfort zone. And once they get out of this comfort zone, they have physiological problems. It is said that once they get to plus or minus this 5% over their normal temperature, body temperature range, then that's the time the animals will be some more compromised. So when temperature increase to more than the upper critical range, and this of course varies from one animal species to the other, the animal will begin to suffer the level of heat stress. So animals have developed their own response to these changes in climate, and some of them they'll reduce feed intake, they'll increase their water intake. Some of their physiological function, like their reproductive and productive efficiency, will change. And in cows and pigs in particular, they'll have so they'll have less in terms of their quality of the oil that they produce. And of course, there will be change in reproduction rate. And of course, there'll be loss of biodiversity as well as a result of the heat stress. The populations, some population you find over the years that have decreased significantly. And so one of the things in terms of climate change, as early as 2000, we have lost about 16% of our livestock breeds as a result of climate change. And so we're seeing less water buffalo, we're seeing cattle, but the breeds we're seeing are getting less in terms of goats, pigs, all of these animals. In terms of having the 200 and odd different type of breed, they're coming down to the ones that are able to withstand these changes in climate. And of course, cattle are the highest number of extinct breed. And of course, we know why, because they're also the animal that is most affected by climate change based on their activity. So the livestock species that are the highest percentage of risk so far, we have chicken, and because of the whole commercialization of chicken, we're seeing less. We're seeing about 33% less of the chicken breeds, 18% as it relates to pigs, and 16% as it relates to cattle breeds. So livestock contribute about roughly 15% of the total annual anthropogenic greenhouse gas emission, and the influence through land use, feed production, animal production, and manure and transportation are the main ways. And so we're looking now at how the impact of livestock on climate change. So if we look at feed production, we're looking at the whole management of the animal management and how it affects on in terms of nitrate production, carbon dioxide, and methane gases. Of course, one of the big events is feed production and how we can use more crop residue. We can introduce more leguminous crops. We can find ways of to decompose the whole atmospheric nitrogen. We can cut down on the amount of nitrogen in the air through nitrogen fixation. And of course, we can use, yes?
I'm sorry to intervene, but I hope you're wrapping up your last couple of slides now.
Yes, I'm just using this as a general, and we'll wrap up. All right. So these are some of the the positive effect that we can have. And in terms of feed production, we can control the way we use our fertilizer applications, and we can pool in terms of our transportation to cut down on some of the emissions. And of course, we can use crop management to manage some of these. And we can also, in terms of animal production, control some of the enteric fermentation of small ruminant. So that was like a summary of what we did. So I'll go straight to the mitigation. I'll go straight to some of the adoption measures. Yes, so of course we can use the production and management system modification. We can change our breeding strategies, and of course policy changes, and that have to be at the higher level of government. With science and technology advances, we can use that to minimize some of the ways we use our livestock and in the feed. Change in farmer perception and adaptive capacity, because a lot of times farmers prefer not to listen up front or not. So we have to develop policies in which we can have our farmers be a part of the decision-making process. In terms of livestock production, we can diversify some of the livestock. We can do livestock crop integration to down on so that we have less methane emissions. Changing in the timing and location of our farm operation could have. We could also develop breeding strategies. We could develop local gene banks, especially for the indigenous types of animals that have survived over the years. We could look to preserving some of those animals, and this can be done through the semen and embryo collection from outstanding and adaptive species. We can also look at the selection of breeds that have survived relatively high and are producing relatively high over the years. And of course, we have to change farmers' perception, collect information about farmers' perception to mitigate these measures. We should include our farmers in the whole rural policy in development and execution. And this could be done through implementation of farmer field schools and farming systems methodology. And of course, we could look at carbon sequestration, conservation, tillage, erosion reduction, deal with soil acidity, double cropping, and so on, to cut down on some of the use of fertilizer. And one of the things that we might want to look at is the whole manure and fertilizer management, more proper composting. We can also adjust the animal diets, come down from the lot of high protein concentrate. And of course, we should do regular soil testing to make sure we don't over use in terms of nitrogen fertilizer and more organic fertilizer. Of course, we could also use a shift in human dietary trends. And this is probably the most difficult ones, because we know as a people, once we start to get richer, we tend to eat more meat, right? And once in that middle era, once we start to get more money, we thought that we should eat more steak and more high quality meat as such. So we feel compelled to increase in that area. So what we might want to do is to get more people to actually consume more vegetables and more plant-based material. And of course, we want to look at how climate change affect livestock, and look at some of the ways in which we could improve to allow our food security to be on the rise. Livestock production will be negatively impacted, will continue to be negatively impacted because of disease and water availability, Climate change will affect the nutritional content of the livestock process. Climate change, adaptation and mitigation practices and policy frameworks are critical to protect the livestock production and the whole livestock industry. Interaction between climate change and livestock production maybe not well understood, especially in the Caribbean, despite the amount of research that is done globally. Because we're not seeing a lot of research as far as the mitigation, especially with ruminant in the region. There are limited amount. I must mention one of my colleagues this year have been doing some work with history and livestock within the Caribbean, but it needs a lot more research to be done. And it needs a lot more research to be done and more studies must be performed on the small ruminant industry. This is my attempt, and thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you, Albert. Just as I was coming in to give you a time check, I saw your conclusions, so I threw up. So you wrapped up just in time before I hooked you off the stage. But I would have given you some extra time because you are the only livestock presentation, and I didn't want it to be shortchanging the livestock participants who would have joined just to hear what they can do in their sector. So thank you for that. We're gonna have questions because we have to stay to time to be able to conclude this in the slotted time. And so please feel free now to field your questions. We would prefer if you field them, if you're going to be writing in the Q&A box, not in the chat, because then it becomes mixed in with other information and it's hard for us to see them. So please put your questions in the Q&A box, and of course you can raise your hand. Albert, I see many excellent presentation, good presentation comments, and I'm not seeing any hands. So maybe you were very exhaustive and we will not be getting any questions from the floor, but
maybe the persons participating are those livestock crop persons, so they know what they don't know.
I think so. I have seen a couple names that I know to be livestock, and I won't call them. I won't call the names. All right.
I'm seeing a couple names.
Please reiterate how climate change affects the loss of breeds.
I didn't get that.
The loss of breeds. Reiterate how climate change affects the loss of breeds.
Okay. Over the years, if we realize that there are several livestock breeds, and it's not only for cattle. We can look at goats, we can look at rabbits, we can look at even chickens, and the ones that are cannot withstand that climate change, they'll become extinct over time. You know, and that is why a lot of countries are trying to preserve the genotype, and it's a good thing, and embryo transfer, especially for animals that are out in the wild. It is about the fittest survival in feed in some areas. Then the animals that are more aggressive, those are the ones that will survive, and the ones that are not as aggressive. And the animals that cannot withstand the heat, eventually they'll become extinct as well. And also because of selection pressure, because animals of heat stress, they're not performing to their capacity, then the first ones to be called. And that's a part of the whole selection process.
We have another question. What potential is there for mitigating climate change through forest practices?
Well, of course, over the world, like even before, even without the drastic impact of climate change, some countries, we have severe winters and very hot summers. So what they do in terms of feed preservation, they produce in abundance when the season allow, and then they'll have things like silage, haylage, hay, and storage in barns. If you look at some of the cooler countries, like in Europe and in the Americas, every medium to large farm would have a barn, and in that barn would be hay, and there'll be the silage, and that's where the term "make hay while the sunshine" comes from. So in terms of climate change even within the Caribbean region, I know CARDI have been trying to get farmers to preserve or conserve during the time of abundance, and more so now in Jamaica. Right now we have a big scarcity as far as hay is concerned. So we are encouraging farmers or producers to get into the production of hay, where they can store for themselves and they'll be able to sell to other farmers. But this is a practice all over the world to preserve, and even now in a time they have high protein feed. In years past, CARDI have done some trials in Jamaica to see how well some of the legumes, such as the alfalfa and the sriracha and stuff, get grown in Jamaica, and we have done that. It is, I don't say about the commercialized stuff like alfalfa in Jamaica. We have a few hay producers, and because of demand that we have now, the cost of hay is very high in Jamaica, and I guess the same if it's available in other areas of the Caribbean. And I assume that the cost is very high. I even know one farmer in Trinidad who actually imports his hay and silage from outside of the Caribbean. So that is something that we can think of in terms of maximizing our production through the conservation of forages.
Okay, thank you, Albert. I'm seeing a couple of questions in the Q&A box, and I understand there's one in the chat box. Let me just start with the first one. Is CARDI going to provide AI training here in Montserrat? Can you answer that, Albert? We have done a lot of AI training, and now with
I cannot say whether CARDI is going to provide AI training in Montserrat. What I can say is that a couple of years ago, we have done some extensive training in assisted breeding techniques. I know that St. Lucia is one of the beneficiaries, and they have been very successful in of that activity. In TNT, I'm not sure why in the training, who can do that training, and if not, we have persons in the ministry with whom we collaborate. If there is a need, then they could get in touch with the CARDI office, maybe Ansari, to guide them on whether training could be done through Jamaica, through the other islands. That training has been done. Our person have been certified to do AI and ET training. Maybe that can be arranged.
Okay, there is another question here. Please expand on the adaptation of feeds and feeding systems for ruminants, especially to reduce heat stress and methane excretion.
Say that again.
Please explain or expand on the adaptation of feeds and feeding systems for small ruminants, especially to reduce heat stress and methane excretion.
Okay, so in terms of our feeding systems, for small ruminants, and I did mention a bit before in terms of the whole conservation practices. We are lucky in the Caribbean that we have a whole year-round season where we could grow crops, but we also have a lot of shrubs and legumes and trees within our locations, which we are not used. I've seen people out of South and Central America to indicate that our blood in the Caribbean, because we have a lot of forage that we're not using. When I travel through the Caribbean, I see a lot of I see trailing legumes, I see shrubs and trees. If we are aware of those and we could harness those, we could collect these through drying. For example, lucina, we could harvest the lucina, dry it, collect the leaves, and it can be stored over a long period of time. It provides an amount of protein. In terms of our conservation of forages, we can use methodologies for the smaller farmers. We can do small plastic bags, 45-gallon drums, which could seal them and cut our grass. And a lot of our Caribbean islands still have a little bit of molasses to increase the palatability of feed. So once we ensile those can be stored for long periods. For example, when we have incidents of floods or long hurricane season, or when we have incident of extended dry period that we've been having over the past couple of years, then we could fall back on the feed that have been conserved, right? So we have to look to conservation. We have to look to growing the forages that can persist in our areas, because in every climatic area, there are forage types that can do well. Sometimes we make the mistake of trying to introduce new forages into a particular area without studying the area to see which of the grasses or bushes grow better in the area. And either you're going to continue to grow those, or you're going to introduce crops that are similar in their morphological characteristics as the ones that we see growing in our actual area. So those are some of the things that we can use to make sure that we have our feeding systems in place.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we have to really manage the time, and you could go on, Albert, with your wealth of experience. There are some things in the chat. Somebody mentioned alfalfa. Alfalfa is great for the soil as well as animals. I just mentioned that. But just to say that the questions that are not answered we will get back to you as we have done for the other sessions in the past. We just collate the remaining questions and send out the responses from the experts that have presented in this webinar series. So Albert, thank you. We're going to move on now for the morning. Steve Mack and thing. Thanks, Albert. If you would stop share, then we can move on to that. But I'm going to just for those who have not been here for the other sessions, I'm going to reintroduce our next two speakers, and then they will present, and we will have a Q&A following both presentations. Okay, so I'm going to introduce Steve Maxime, reintroduce. A plan Trinity Science and Agriculture and was the first agricultural scientist addressing climate change concerns during the Caribbean adaptation climate change C-SAC project in 1997. He had on comprehensive climate regional and international organizations, advisor for the Caribbean, and the current science advisor to the Association of Caribbean Media Workers. He developed the trademarked climate smart agriculture plant C-SAC training, certification, and auditing tool, which we are using to guide our deliberations in this climate smart agriculture. So,
thank you, Leon. Good morning, colleagues. Can everyone see my shared screen?
yes, we can see.
Thank you.
We can see your screen.
So I don't want to take up too much time this morning. I just want to do a quick reflection based on my all attendance. We got off to a really great start in week one, and I mentioned the problems associated with national scale adoption of climate smart agriculture. Things like the incomplete articulation of a truly comprehensive implementation and evaluation, the fact that there was no prioritizing tool against greenwashing, the loss of mitigative contributions from CSA. I am running through these because you're going to get this presentation, and I want you to interrogate this information, as I mentioned on the very first day, at your leisure. Also in week one, I hinted that C-SAC offers the solution to the problems listed, and I hope that over the last 4 weeks, seen actual implementation. So from week one, we said that climate smart agriculture is meant to improve food security, agricultural productivity, increase the resilience of farming systems, climate change by adaptation, while featuring mitigation. We also stress the 5 operational arms we learned. I'm thinking that there's widespread agreement that that change will continue to negatively, I don't think there's any denying on that. And that the use of a comprehensive CSA as per the C-SAC tool or C-SAC viable quality determinant for differential pricing. And I know Dr. Robin would be really interested in that one if we have time to talk later. We learned that larger commercial farmers, we had a very good number from CARDI's operation in Belize that was presented to us by Omira. What else have we learned? That C-SAC provides a proven mechanism to justify climate finance and the inclusion of agricultural initiatives in nationally determined contribution computations. Interesting for the 4 weeks. And that livestock and mixed farming operations using C-SAC. And in the final question and answer session, I'll be able to help Albert, hopefully, with some of these mitigation efforts, including those used to enteric fermentation. As an auditing tool, C-SAC can be used as a means of consensus for smart contracts and for distributed ledger technologies such as blocks. I haven't spent a lot of time on this, but in terms of next steps, this is where this thing is heading. Climate smart agriculture is going to feature in any attempt at digitalization throughout the Caribbean. What have we learned? A comprehensive climate smart agriculture approach is a legitimate measure to address current and future impacts, because your comprehensive climate smart agriculture is summative, it's measurable, it's achievable, and timely. C-SAC is a proven for training. It provides a comprehensive framework. As a self-assessment tool, we said that, and it's irrespective of the size of the operation. As an auditing tool, in digitalization and branding operations, and as a means of authenticating your proof positive of adaptation and mitigation. And in terms of branding and marketing, you can prove, demonstrate that you're eco-friendly, that you're neutral, etc. I am having some connect you, so if I'm, bear with me. But sorry about that. I received a note there about the internet dropping. I understand. Just thank you for your interest over the last into this 5th week, and to thank you all for participating, and to let you know that more comes with climate smart agriculture. One that upon our approach, our previous approach, whether they be at the country level or farms. Thank you very much. Dion?
The physical impacts of climate change and the socio-economic environment in which people exist. Currently, Christian is involved in research seeking to answer the question of how to deliver and utilize climate information to support innovation among farming communities. So, with that, you would appreciate why it is he reflects on what we've done over 5 weeks and how he's moving forward.
Thank you very much, colleagues and participants. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this closing. In my reflection, I do notice when I saw the agenda there was an aspect of climate risk management, and it really does I'm particularly interested in, and I see very relevant even for this closing. So while I'm close to wrap up with introducing an aspect that we haven't, and that is the role of climate information. We are in fact talking about climate change and climate variability. Some leverage that we can take with regards to climate information that is being produced in the region, both at the national and regional level, to inform agricultural practices. Climate smart agriculture is not, we've had a series of presentations over this, this webinar, indicating a number of practices and methodologies and areas of adaptation or strategies to adaptation. But it's not simply those things ad hocly put into practice, chosen, and there's a process by which those come about, at least the adoption of them. Practices, so it's not only the putting these things into practice that make them climate smart agriculture. For example, water management, soil management, by themselves, it does not necessarily mean that we have, in fact, adaptation, good mitigation, and it is in fact productive. And the fact is, practices that work for one person or one group is not necessarily going to work for all groups across similar contexts, because really contexts are made of different factors, and they tend to be very, very specific, and successful climate smart agriculture must be driven by those the persons that they are intended to meet, and they are the ones largely can define what those needs are. Indeed, climate smart compliance speaks to the practices being relevant for the people. So we ask ourselves this question in closing: who needs what, where, and why? And depending on the scenario, this can be a very complicated question. I want to bring to your attention, even as we are speaking about climate smart agriculture, one of the leverages, I think, as I mentioned earlier, that we can make is using climate information systems to help inform our decisions. And even in seeking climate smart, we are also buying in our compliance, we are looking at what is relevant for the context. This is Caribbean agroclimatic bulletin that is being between the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology and CARDI, and it's under this framework where information isn't simply useful for aviation purposes anymore. A long time now, and we in agriculture can use what is being produced decision making. So, but just to raise that it is being produced, it reflects, recaps past and future climate and weather patterns. It gives an outlook with particular relevance for the agriculture sector. And then on the bottom right section, you would notice there's climate strategies, in which we try to put it, the information in a meaningful form, especially at the ground level. An example in which this can be relevant, about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, in which I took this. I sat with farmers in area, mountainous known as Carmen, that have some agriculture activities going there, as well some parties. You know, to see how this 2 months found that in both contexts, as I explained earlier, it being climate smart agriculture need to be context specific. In both cases, they had climate risk. As you would imagine, those who are particularly concerned with floods that comes particularly through the season, influx of pests and diseases. Whereas for paramount farmers, they are particularly concerned with the dry season and the associated droughts and dry spells that come, because it does signal to, in each case, whether there's too much or too little of rain water. These are listed there, but we did find that what this bulletin was very useful for was indicating to these farmers when the onset and offset of these different seasons and climate risk are most likely to happen. Adaptation strategies, whether that means clearing their rivers or the timing of their pesticide application, whether to save more money in the rainy season or dry season, as the case may be, and so that when any likely chance that they are negatively, they have a fallback on. And these are some examples in which how climate information can be used to support our decision making at the farm, but as well as levels. One of the other areas or the other tool that we are working CARDI together with the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology, as well as other Caribbean organizations, is the development of an early warning system that would help, similar to the agroclimatic, this time across climate timescales, looking at both short-term, medium-term, and long-term forecasts and climate scenarios. And these are really particularly to again, inform management decisions at farm scale, national scale, and the regional level. It does have particular implication for, especially when we look at the long-term outlook climate. What are some of the national and institutional policies that we need to put in place to ensure that we are, in fact, heading in a climate-smart agricultural direction? And with that, I really want to thank the organizers as well as the participants for this opportunity again to share as well as to reflect today. And as Steve rightly said, this is really a continuation of our efforts. This is really to spark an ongoing conversation and collaboration in which, for example, this tool I just presented isn't something that can be developed apart from the users that we have intended, and really is within a comprehensive and participatory approach. We can develop tools together that are, in fact, relevant and useful for all. So thank you very much. Over to you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Christian. And both you and Steve now, we would invite the participants to field their questions. Please remember to type it in the Q&A box. If you put it in the chat, it gets lost over there. And we won't be able to see it readily. So please, if you have any questions for Steve and Christian, I guess you could have a final opportunity to ask Albert anything that you have outstanding with his presentation as well.
Yeah, I use this opportunity to ask Albert a question. Albert, do you want to share with us some of the initiatives that have been used to reduce enteric fermentation, the use of ionophores and specialized feeding? I've seen instances where biochar has been suggested as being added to the diet. Do you want to comment on that?
Okay, we have used biochar. It's one of them that we have used. In some of the instances, we don't have a lot of choices basically, if we try to keep away from overfeeding on concentrate feed and try to use our pasture as a more focused way of feeding. The smaller farmers, because of their lack of expanse and the cost of buying like hay, they tend to feed a little bit more bug feed, but we always suggest that they go to more forage feed and not to over fertilize their pastures, and depending on rainwater for most of the time. But some people have irrigation available, so they'll use that instead of using too much fertilizer. But we have used biochar in some cases, and that is mostly for the ruminant production. That's mostly for the ruminant production. Non-ruminants is another issue, which is not very serious in terms of adding to the whole climate issues that exist.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, there is a participant asking if they will get the copies to all the presentations in the series. You have to register. If you do not register, you would not receive the presentations, but if you do, then we will send them to you. So that, any other questions, please? Oh, I see a few hands raised there. Let me go to Mr. Evans Gooding.
That's Greg here. Greg
Okay.
Rollins. I will wait on the participants to ask questions. I wanted to.
Right, here, Mr. Gooding seems to have taken his hand down, so you may go ahead now.
I wanted to pose a question / comment to Steve. There's a process, an established process for organic agriculture and branding commodities organic. There's a fair trade / good agricultural practices gap for branding products to go to specific markets, both regional and international. In the case of C-SAC, is there a process in place to certify? I know there's a method for measuring and quantifying and stuff like that. But is there a process for taking a C-SAC to a market where it is recognized?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Greg. Yes and yes. What I've done is use my fair trade experience to see how they went about certifying and authenticating. Fair trade uses something called FLOW, which is the Fair Trade Labeling Organization. This is the auditing system that verifies that you are compliant, literally. What C-SAC does, and what we have been trying to implement here in Grenada in a sort of piecemeal fashion, is to get the brand, the logo. I don't know if I probably didn't stress it enough, but a registered trademark for the process has a brand logo. That circular looking C thing with the numbers, so that each number corresponds to a C-SAC level of certification, and that is where the price differential is going to be. As I said, we are still in the past the negotiating stage, but we're still in discussions with a major buyer, major purchaser here in Grenada. I'm starting it here in Grenada, and without telling tales out of school, it is going to be a certifiable mark. That is why I stress that C-SAC is a certification scheme as well. You have to have a certified C-SAC auditor do the monitoring. So as I said, apart from being a self-assessment tool, you can use it on your farm and see, okay, Omira graded herself graded the hot pepper operations in Belize at C-SAC level 2. I'm not against Omira, as she knows, but I may go as a certified C-SAC auditor and ask the questions different. It's a C-SAC level 3. I could be more generous in terms of the official demarcations. I'm suggesting, without the last, that should have done estimate. If you're going to be a certification scheme, we're not going to be dealing with estimates. When I talk about percent of this or that, we actually have to get into the meant. That is where the official person will come from. Similarly, as you have with organic inspectors. That helps. As I said, it is something that is being rolled out. Implementation, you would many so that although the process and the certification has been trademarked and is licensed, etc., there's still some fine-tuning to be done in terms of did that help?
Yeah,
right.
I just wanted to add one more point. Who decides on the price differentials in a system like that?
This is the board. Sorry, well, I shouldn't even be saying the board. The Now, when they're purchasing, they're the ones who are going to have to come up with what sort of differential pricing that they will facilitate. But it's linked to a wire, which I can't, I can't get into right now.
Can you read this option for whatever? What do the C-SAC do in order to perform the self-assessment?
Oh, they all registered participants will have access to it. I mean, in absence of the handheld mobile, I can share with you our how do I know if our free or Excel-based app, which is what Omira used, which is what Evans used. So I can send that to anyone willing to, anyone requiring it, anyone registering for this program app to get it. It's an Excel-based. What is this? An Excel-based sheet that answers the 20 questions that are the basis of C-SAC. So if you were following, at any point during the last 5 years, you know that C-SAC has compliance. We're talking about resource conservation, safety, etc., etc. And in each of those categories, you have 4 questions, 4 basic questions, which will, of course, be variations of theme if you're dealing with a pure cropping project or etc. That's featured on the freely available, easily available based app. But the mobile app, the mobile Google Store, Apple Play Map app is still in production. So I hope that helps. And otherwise, I'm easy to find.
For example, to adopt some of the information that was shared. Brother Albert just gave a powerful presentation. And I think his presentation alone should have taken up the 10 weeks that we've been going through. Because around the farmers around me, I've not seen any in what Albert expresses here. Would we see out of this program a selection of farms we could do a model farm? I'm saying out of this exercise we do for 10 weeks, we are going to select a farm or farmers other than the CARDI premises where we can demonstrate and show in the future what all this information was all about. Because I'm saying, just looking at what talk about in terms of the stress on the animal, he mentioned carbon emission, he mentioned composting, he mentioned the hay, he mentioned the mulch. We're looking at the small ruminants from milk and from meat, and looking at the waste from the animal for crop production and crop production yield. How are we going to apply or engage farmers in everything that was discussed? From a farmer standpoint, I might change some of my practice to adapt some of what we're saying here. But after today, would it be lifted up to the farmer to utilize all the information that was disseminated here, or there will be some follow-up exercises? for Mr. Maxime, I normally get some links from him when I mention irrigation, but I heard him clearly saying today food nutrition. And I was so pleased with when he explained to me the difference between food nutrition and food security. I'm saying all of this to say, wow, how are we going to bring all this information to the farm level? And a lot of it seems to be coming from, yes, experience and from research in CARDI. But what I see sometime in the future, all of the information compiled here will be coming down to the farmers level. We'll be engaging farmers in terms of maybe using some farm in Jamaica or Grenada or Trinidad or some way to actually come up with model farm to up we're talking about.
Okay, Mr. Gooding, I remember you well, and thank you very much for participating all of these weeks. We do want the farmers to be among the participants. The information is for you to implement in truth, and so you need to be here to learn and to hear. The short answer to your question on the sharing with the farmers and how it gets to the farmers is yes, we do plan to take this to the farmers. In fact, we have been taking it to the farmers in a number of projects where we have on-farm demonstration plots. I'm going to speak specifically of the coconut project being rolled out currently, but the livestock interventions, I will leave to Albert to talk about some of the on-farm training and demonstrations that have been done. And it's just a matter of rolling out these demonstration plots. And we do this on the projects, unfortunately. And when we do that, the hope is that we have lead farmers in the mix who would be the satellites out there that other farmers can observe and learn from. And also we have field days with these farm groups. And that is how we're hoping that the farmers themselves will get information and see how to implement some of these measures. But I am not the person speaking today, so I'm going to defer to Mr. Ferron to make an intervention. We also have to be mindful of the time because we want it to end at 11:30. We're cutting it really close, but I think it's important to just have an intervention to respond to you, Mr. Gooding, before we move on to the closing activities today. Albert, you have anything to say in brief?
Yeah, Diane, yeah, thanks, Mr. Gooden, for enunciating so much and to know that somebody was actually listening in details to some of the things that were said. But if I may ask, which of the islands Mr. Gooden is on?
Based in Grenada.
Oh, you're in Grenada. Well, yes, in terms of a package, I'm not certain that Grenada had a demonstration center as such. And I've visited a station in Grenada where we have some small milk demonstration units, which really, as it relates to the information, however, the information is readily available within CARDI. And some of the neighboring islands, we have persons who are actually trained in some of the technologies in terms of forage production and conservation. Some of them a little more livestock based in terms of the artificial insemination and embryo transfer program. And we have also online some of the activities that were done on the recent CFC project. I know that I myself have come into Grenada, to St. Lucia, to Guyana, and I've done some training alongside the local persons with the farm. Information is, and you're always able, upon request, to get this training done. But first, look to the information that is there. We have online CARDI itself that could into a demonstration farm. I know that in some, certainly in Jamaica, and in some other of our islands, we have small demonstration farms which demonstrate some of the production capacities and some of the things that you're able to touch and to look at. So yes, it is there, and it will be good for you if you can find the resources or the funding agency that will be willing to come to Grenada to set up a facility. If you speak to your CARDI representative there, then they should be able to apply. So I know that there was a robust system in place in terms of goat milk production there. I'm not certain the status it's at now, but that was a start, and I'm sure that we could build on that. Thank you.
Right, but hey, what you just saying in terms of milk, but we're talking in terms of a climate smart farm, whereby yes, we could take all those things into consideration. The production, there is milk, but that seems what we're seeing now is just the traditional way in terms of we're doing things. But if we're talking in terms of climate smart farm and taking into consideration small ruminants, that is what I'm talking about. How can we in this day and age see small ruminants by itself? How can we see the same waste from the goat, utilize that in the soil, the house that we're building for the goat now? I'm talking in terms of this smart environment.
Okay, Mr. Gooding, I find your interventions very, very important, and we do have such demonstrations. Unfortunately, the time in this particular forum does not allow for us to expand on everything. We are going to investigate the possibility of a follow-up activity, which we'll poll in near the end of this presentation today. I do want to close this session though, because we have some time constraints. I'm gonna ask you to bear with us for probably an additional 10 minutes from now, 10 minutes over the 11:30 cutoff point, so that we can wrap up the rest of this. But we will follow up on that, and we do have these types of demonstration operations of the integrated livestock crop production models, and we can have those discussions as to how we can move forward with your suggestions for Grenada. So that being said, I think we just need to end this discussion now, this Q&A session, and move into just the closing off of this wonderful webinar that we have had. We promise to go through the questions that you have posted and to be registered so that you can get all of this after the webinar series is closed off. So we're going to move forward. I want to thank you all. Albert, we usually give the speakers a last say. I think Stephen Christian had a final say, so I'm just going to give you a final say for 2 minutes, and then we will go into the closing, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Dion. And thanks to the organizers for giving us this opportunity to speak a little bit about livestock. Oftentimes, the emphasis is on production. Anytime you get a chance to speak, because livestock is really an integral part of our situation as far as it relates to our Somali Island states in the Caribbean. It's interesting that are posing these questions. It may be the only organization within the region that have this kind of reach, and we're always available and ready to assist in issues related to small ruminants in the Caribbean. Now, climate change is not really new, and we want to see how much we can fit the whole livestock sector, especially small ruminant, which is CARDI's responsibility in the Caribbean, and how we can offer mitigating situations to farmers in the region. We have started doing maybe quite a bit of work throughout the region in terms of how to harvest our manure, how to treat it, and how to reintegrate it back into production system. So, you know, it is not a one-day issue. It is something ongoing, and we always be willing and ready to participate, and so that we can help our farmers in our developing states. Again, I thank you for the opportunity, and I'm here ready for your question, and wherever we can help as far as CARDI's reaches, we'll try to do. Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Albert. Thank you. You did fill that gap that was addressed to us earlier in the series. So thank you very much. So without further ado, I'm going to invite our representatives of the two partner organizations responsible for putting on this webinar. I'm going to invite, first of all, from CARDI, from our headquarters, Mr. Ansari Hussain, who is the Manager of Science, Technology, and Innovation in CARDI, and he's also CARDI representative in Barbados, to just give some closing statements. And he followed by the project manager of the PPCR, and she operates out of the Mona office for research and innovation at the University of the West Indies. So Ansari, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dion. Good afternoon, good day, everyone, because we have persons from different parts of the world, so I hope good day is the safest thing to say. I am happy on behalf of CARDI to bring you this closing state at the conclusion of this webinar series. And I want to take the opportunity to congratulate the organizers, my colleagues at CARDI, IDB, UE, and the CIF for managing and implementing a successful program. I know that it was no easy task. We had 12 sessions over 5 weeks, 14 presenters and facilitators. I also understand that up to the data produced last week, we had up to close to 500 individuals would have participated in these sessions over the last 5 weeks. One session in particular had 163 persons. We had attendees coming from all the 14 CARDI territories. And we had also persons represented from other, including the United Kingdom, the United States, British Virgin Islands, Anguilla, Curacao, Azerbaijan, Suriname, Colombia, Aruba, Turkey, India, and so on. A wide range of participants. We had students, farmers, ministries and NGOs, educators, university lecturers, suppliers and distributors, and so on. It was good to see that 50% of the attendees fell under the farmer category. What this signals to me is that our farmers, our major clients at CARDI, they are interested in climate smart agriculture, and they are willing to, at the very least, hear what we have to say and what is being said by our partners. And having heard, I expect that there will be adoption of the guiding principles and the practices, of course, the proper support. And the question was raised, where do we go? Beside applying what we learned, and of course, the team continue to provide the support to participants, particularly in light of the comment made by Mr. Gooding by developing the appropriate mechanism to do so. I expect that we will, of course, share the contact information or the presenters so that persons can contact them as needed as they continue on this journey to implement at the farm level. We must also continue with sessions like these to reinforce the teaching and learning, and we must also continue to spread the message. These 500 or so persons that would have attended these sessions across these territories, they are now basically our mouthpieces for constantly educating, sensitizing, and raising awareness in others. In addition to this, we have the recorded sessions, which will be made. They are already available online, some of them, for much easier and faster dissemination, which persons can then slowly so that they could understand properly. Maybe some persons missed a session or two. It was good to hear from Mr. Gooding that he attended basically all. Maybe some persons missed a session or two and they need to go back to understand something better. They need to clarify an issue certain line. As regional bodies and agencies, we also must continue that can and place the relevant policies as well, encourage the adoption of these technologies. And while we prepare to implement mitigation measures and climate smart agriculture in this battle against the effects of climate change, as we must, particularly in our context, at the least, equal attention also has to be paid to its causes. And I say this conscious of the recently released report of the IPCC. I think it was released last week. This is the IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And this is the UN body for assessing the science related to climate change. So permit me as I close to just highlight a few key messages, not many, out of that report, which I think should be brought to the table. This report, remember, it was more than 200 science representing 66 countries. And I just have 5 key messages as I close. One, the human influence has warmed the planet at an unprecedented rate in the last 2,000 years. The report confirms that human-induced climate change is affecting weather and climate events, which is on the rise. And recall, at the opening of this series, we would have mentioned lots of those experiences in this region over the last few years. 3, the report emphasized the urgent need to have deep reductions in greenhouse gas emissions over the next 10 years. 4, it pointed out that the global concentrations of atmospheric CO2 is higher and rising faster than at any time in the last 2 million years, with about 85% coming from burning fossil fuels. And 5, some changes cannot be reversed within centuries or even millennia. Notwithstanding that, the report states that it is not too late to prevent the worst case scenario, but we have to act decisively now. Then, therefore, while we continue to prepare for the effects of climate change, as we have been doing in this series of webinars, we also must continue to do our part, no matter how small it is, to ensure that we protect the environment and our planet through our actions. Thank you, and I wish you a good day.
Thank you so much. And you can go ahead.
Thank you, Dion. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for sticking with us throughout this very exciting, engaging, and informative Climate Smart Agriculture webinar series. For those of you who would be participating from Jamaica, a surprise farm. And the session was on mitigation for agriculture, which was quite timely because we have reports of several disturbances in the agricultural sector with trees, uprooted trees, and so on. so, you know, it's just good timing that we had that session while we were having a live event. So we were able to apply the knowledge immediately to what was happening to us, at least here in Jamaica. So that's for me personally. I'm not an agriculturalist, but the information that I got 5 weeks was quite useful. And sharing the information with others. That's too is the critical part and the critical piece that PPCR plays in supporting these sort of initiatives. It is our role to ensure that information is disseminated. Holders can be better informed about how these weather phenomena, so that it garners to our better interest as Caribbean nationals. I must commend and speak to the contribution of the climate investment funds in the PPCR project, the Inter-American Development Bank as the executor of the funds, the University of the West Indies, MONA, and the MONA Office for Research and Innovation as the executing units for delivering the PPCR project. We also have several regional partners throughout the Caribbean. Group at MONA, the Caribbean Public Health Agency, and the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology. I must also thank and give special commendations to the team that actually worked on executing, planning, and delivering the Climate Smart webinar series. That team's being headed by Desirena Delancey, who is our CARDI coordinator for the project, and our communications officer, John Per Kavanaugh, who designed all of the promotional material for the event. We thank them immensely for their work. We also thank Dr. Steve Maxime for assisting us with putting together the package that was delivered over the period. We thank all the speakers for coming on and on short notice for some of you in delivering insightful and energetic presentations. From the comments and the questions that were raised, we know that presentations received. At this point, I encourage all participants, if you have not done so, to complete the registration information. Data is very important for our project, as this outreach that their funds is having throughout these projects. And so I encourage all participants to complete the registration information. We will be able to generate a certificate of participation to also share with you, so you will have some evidence of the time spent with us over these 5 weeks. Thanks again for joining. We look forward to having you if we do decide to run the session again. I heard Mrs. Clark Harris speaking about doing follow-up sessions, and we remain committed to working with CARDI in delivering those. So thank you for participating, and hopefully we will see each other again on another platform.
Thank you so much, Erica. You have really helped to make my task at this point at the vote of thanks section of the program very easy. I would like to, however, reiterate some of them, definitely to acknowledge the donors without whom we would not even have this forum going on. We want to thank the IDB and the Climate Investment Funds for those. I also want to individually thank the presenters. I want to acknowledge Dr. Anika Minot, Dr. Dale Rankin, Dr. Gregory Robin, Dr. Dwight Robinson, Anika Minot, Dr. Joseph Lindsay, Dr. Leslie Simpson, Mr. Christian Fleming, Omira Avila Rostand, Paul Lucas, Steve Maxime, Francine Webb Lawrence, and Cheryl McFarlane. All of you helped to make this that to come back to, and also contributed significantly to spreading information that needs to get out there to help us, as Ansari Hussein just mentioned. We have a fight to get the climate change situation under control for our own existence. It is not optional. It's not something that we're doing for somebody else. We're doing it for all of us. So we really need to pay attention to some of those and see how we can all participate. Erica said that I committed to another series. I really was not. I was just talking about a follow-up so that we can and so we have registration process, a question as to how we might do that in a panel discussion of some sort. So that's what we're looking towards. I also want to just pause, I mean, really pause to recognize this next person, Ms. Desrena Delancey. If you do not know this woman, you would not know just by looking at her what she's capable. She has been the motor, the engine behind all of this, and all of your follow-up activities that you're seeing, your reminders, everything. She is responsible for the success of this webinar series, and I want to just pause that. Separate her from, we all did our part, but she, for all our things, and I just want to recognize him as well. Mr. Kavanaugh, I'm getting his pronunciation right. I mean, thank you all, our partners. I want to thank on point, I was in that closing statement, resonated with me, and it really underscored all of the reasons we're here. I want to also recognize the input of Dr. Gregory Robin, who was among us not so long ago, and he came back to assist us with this. He actually started the process of developing the webinar. I want to thank Christian Fleming and Steve Maxime. I want to thank them for setting the backdrop to this. I also want to thank Dale Rankin, his expertise in all of the modeling activities that were described, and with C-SAC as well, all helped to just undergird this session to make it relevant. Thank you. I hope I'm not forgetting anyone in my list here. I think I've covered everybody. Thank you, Erica. We always talk, so you know that we value all of the good relationship that we have had with the project as we implement the agricultural component. Now, participants, I'm ending on you. Thank you again so very much, all hundreds of you. Thank you for your time, and I hope that this was useful enough for you to start this minute. In fact, to have started 5 weeks. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to end this webinar series now. May God bless you all, and please stay safe. We are still in a pandemic, and please do your climate mitigation measures. We are in the hurricane season, as Erica mentioned. We have to be ready for anything. Thank you very much. Goodbye.